Today's lesson is the very first official lesson in our Unit 6, and we're going to start focusing on some geometry as well as statistics. So let's start with distance and midpoint. The distance between 2 points when they are along the x or y axis, like in graph A here, is very simple to count. The distance is 3, okay? However, when we start having a slanted line, like in graph B here, the distance is not as easy to calculate, okay? So the way that we are going to approach it is we are going to use the Pythagorean theorem, where you would create a right triangle, okay? And so this would be leg A, this would be leg B, and this would be our hypotenuse C. And so let's remind ourselves of what that Pythagorean theorem says. It says the sum of the squared legs, so A squared plus B squared, because those are the legs, is equal to the square of the hypotenuse, which is side C. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay? Now, in order to solve this equation, when we plug in those numbers, we're going to have to get that C by itself, because that's going to be our unknown variable. And so in order to do that, the inverse of a square is a square root, and we talked about that way back in Unit 2. So what we will need to do is to square root, all right, both sides, and that's how we're going to get the C by itself. All right, and we're going to look at some examples. Now, it is important that when we're square rooting that we understand the different values of squares. So let's make a list of our squares. All right, so you might need to pause the video to copy my list of perfect squares. And the reason that I made this list of perfect squares is because they can help us when we're working backwards as well. For instance, let's look at 5 squared is 25. Well, the square root of 25 equals 5. Okay, so they work forwards and backwards. So eventually you will want to try to memorize these at least up through 15. Those are the most common. But you can have this as a reference for you, okay? A good place to write this list is just right down the left side of the very small margin on your paper. Okay, that is a good place to put it. All right, and then let's also talk about midpoint. The midpoint is the point directly in the middle of a line, okay? So I kind of estimated where the middle of these two lines is, okay? And so the middle is like the halfway point. So I want you to think about if you had taken 2 tests. Your first test was an 80, your second test was a 90. What would be the middle grade? Well, 80 and 90, what's right in the middle of those, 80 and 100, what's right in the middle of those is 90. And so what you really are doing is you're finding the average of 2 grades. So how do you find the average? Well, you take your first test and you add it to your second test, and then you would divide by 2. That's how you find the average. So to find the midpoint, we're going to find the average of the 2 x values, and then we're going to find the average of the 2 y values. And then notice I separated with them with a comma, and then I'm going to wrap them up in parentheses, and the 2 numbers that I get will be together as an ordered pair, and that will be the location of the midpoint. All right, so let's go take a look at our first example. Number one, we're going to find the distance between A and B. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by creating a right triangle where I can kind of count, okay? So here's my right triangle. The distance of the leg that's going straight across is 4. The distance of the leg going up and down is 5. And then I don't know the length of that side C. So I'm going to plug them in to the formula. Okay, so we're going to do the square root of 5 squared plus 4 squared. All right, and so 5 squared is 25. 4 squared is 16. Let's now add those together, and I get 41. All right, and this is going to be what C equals all the way down. Okay, so if we look at the list on the other side of our paper, or up above on our paper, 40, forgot what that number was, 41. So if you look on this list for 41, 41 falls right here between 6 and 7. So I know that my value is going to be a little bit bigger than 6. What I want you to do is type it in your calculator and get the exact value. In your calculator, to do that, you will type the second button, which is blue, okay? On some older calculators, it might be yellow. And then you will type the x squared button on the left, okay, near the number 7. And then you will type the number 41, and then you will hit enter. And after you do all that, you should get, and now I'm going to round the answer they give me to just be 6.4. Okay, and that is the distance of side C. Perfect. So what I would like for you to do is to pause this video, and I want you to try the same thing for example number 2. I want you to try to find the distance between A and B. All right, you should have gotten 2 squared plus 7 squared under that square root. All right, so if you haven't finished it yet, I want you to pause the video now and simplify this equation, all right? And also practice with the calculator and see if you can get the decimal value of your answer. All right, and so I came to the distance between A and B in number 2 is 7.3. So 7.3, all right? Let's go ahead and try to find our midpoints and see how that works, okay? The very first thing for midpoint that we need to do is identify what is the ordered pair for point A and what is the ordered pair for point B. All right, so I've identified my 2 ordered pairs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the average of the x values. So let me use green. Okay, so I'm focusing on the 2 x values. 0 plus 4 divided by 2. And that's going to give me 4 divided by 2 is 2. Next, I'm going to focus on the y values. So let me actually label that this was x, and now I'm going to do y. Okay, so for the y values, I have negative 2 plus 3, and then I'm going to need to divide that by 2. I'm finding the average of 2 numbers. And negative 2 plus 3 is 1, and so I end up with 1/2. And I told you that these 2 numbers become an ordered pair together, okay? So that is my midpoint right there, 2 comma 1/2. Now, if you want to check your midpoint, it's actually very easy to do. Let's just go to the graph and the line that's connecting A and B directly. And let's plot the point over 2, up 1/2, and see if visually that appears to be about in the middle of the line. And it should, okay? Perfect job. All right, now what I want for you to do is pause this video and identify the 2 ordered pairs for point A and point B. All right, so if you're unpaused, I'm assuming that you have found your 2 ordered pairs for A and B. Now what we're going to do is find the midpoint of these 2 points. So remember, focus on just your X values first and find the average of those 2 numbers. And then focus on your Y values next. And divide by 2, okay? So go ahead and simplify those, and let's see if you can get to your final answer for your midpoint. So I get my midpoint is at -3, -1/2, which is about right there, and that does look about to be the halfway point between A and B on this graph right there, okay? Great job. What I want us to do is actually to skip ahead. I'd like for you to go down at the bottom of this paper to example 5 and 6. In example 5 and 6, what we see is pretty much the same thing that we just did, but it's like a real life application, okay? So let's read it. In the graph below, point A represents Ashley's house, point B represents Bridget's house, and point C represents Carly's house. Each unit on the graph represents 2 miles, and that will be important to us later. Okay, so let's just circle it so that we don't forget 2 miles. All right, so question 5 says, to the nearest tenth, how many miles is it from Ashley's house to Bridget's house? So let's draw our line from Ashley to Bridget. Those are the 2 that we're focusing on. I would like for you to do what we did in examples 1 and 2 and find the distance between Ashley's house and Bridget's house. Pause this video while you do that. Okay, so you should have created a right triangle and counted the length of the 2 legs. Now you should plug those numbers into our formula. And be sure that you simplify all the way down. Okay, and then you will use your calculator to get a final decimal answer. All right, so our final decimal answer is 12.08, but because this is an application problem, we do have one extra step. Okay, remember each unit on the graph represents 2 miles. So what I need to do is take this and times it by 2 miles. Okay, so my calculator told me 24.16. But I was told to round that to the nearest tenth, so 24.2 miles is my final answer. All right, now let's read number 6. If Ashley and Bridget decided to meet at a location that was halfway for both of them, where would they meet? So I'd like for you to pause the video and find the midpoint between Ashley's house and Bridget's house. Ashley is located at -6, Bridget is located at +5, up 1. So now let's find the midpoint. And be sure to simplify. And if I were to go ahead and graph this, it would be about right here. -1/2, and then up 3.5. Okay? All right, now let's go look at example number 3 and 4 together. So another type of application problem is finding the perimeter of a figure. Okay? So if I just look at this figure, I can count very easily. I know this is 6, this is 8, and this across is 12. What I do not know is this diagonal. Okay? So what I'm going to do is create this right triangle. So right here, and count these numbers. What I will get is this goes down 8 and this extends out 6. And I am going to plug this in to the formula so I can find the length of C. Okay, so 8 squared is 64, 6 squared is 36. Add those together and I get 100, and the square root of 100 is 10. So I now know that the length of C is 10. So let's erase this C and replace it with what we know, which is 10. Okay, so that was really the first part. Now let's do the second part. It wants to know the perimeter. So how do you find the perimeter of a figure? You add up all the sides. Okay, so 8 plus 6 plus 10 plus 12 gives me 36. And that's my final answer. I'd like us to try the same process with the number 4. So if we count this down, it's 9, and this side is 9. What we do not know are the diagonals, okay? Now there is a key word here, parallelogram. It is important to know that a parallelogram has 2 pairs of equal parallel sides. The reason that that's important to know is because I will only need to find the length of one of the diagonals, and then I'll know that the other diagonal matches, okay? So this is 3 and this is 4. So let's find the length of this missing side here. So I'm going to plug these into my equation, and then I'm going to go ahead and simplify and keep simplifying. Okay, and so I find that that diagonal length is 5, which means that this one down here is also 5. And now I'm ready to find the perimeter. Again, means to add, okay? So 9 and 9 and 5 and 5 added all together gives me 28. And that's my final answer. Great job. We are officially done with the first side of our notes. Let's take a look at what the back side has for us. Okay, so now what we're going to look at are some EOC applications. All right, so I am going to give you the official distance formula and just kind of show you how it really is the same formula that we've been using to find the length of our missing side C. So when we have a graph that we can look at and we can actually count the length of a side of the triangle, then that's where we get our A and our B from. But if for some reason we only have ordered pairs and they're way too big to actually plot on a graph, what we would have to do is find the difference between the X values and then square them. That's how we find length, okay? Then we would find the distance between the Y values and we would square them, because again, that's how we find a length. And then finally, we would have to square root in our last step, and that is going to be d for distance. Okay, so you're allowed to think about it as the distance formula or as the Pythagorean theorem, where we're getting the c by itself. So the last step is to take the square root. They're pretty much the same thing, all right? And then just a reminder of our midpoint formula, okay? All right, and so just remember that your midpoint formula gives you an ordered pair as your final outcome, okay? All right, so what I'm going to teach you today is really how to use graphs to help you answer these EOC applications. Next semester, we will revisit this, and at that point in time, we're going to look at some problems that maybe we won't be able to use a graph to solve, so we'll focus algebraically in next semester. But for now, we're going to focus on the graphs, okay? So, keep in mind that on your EOC, these graphs won't be provided for you, but you will have graph paper in front of you, okay? I'm just putting the graphs in the questions or with the questions so that we have a convenient place to put our notes, okay? All right, so number 7. A triangle has vertices at these 3 locations, okay? What is the approximate perimeter of the triangle in units? So what I'd like for you to do is pause the video and plot these 3 points and create a triangle. Perfect. So step 1 is plotting the points. Step 2, let's see, they want us to find the approximate perimeter. So I'm not able to count any of these sides like I did on the other side of our paper in examples 3 or 4. So what I'm going to have to do is define the distance between all of these sides. Okay, so I'm going to color code, and I'm going to find the distance of this side of my triangle in red. So right now, I'm working on step 2, which is to find all of the distances of all the sides. So right now, in red, I'm going to find the length of this side of my triangle. Okay, so pause the video and go ahead and practice that on your own. All right, so for what I'm calling the red side, I got the square root of 20. And I'm just going to leave it like that for now. I'm not going to do anything with it. Okay, now I'm going to do a blue side. And I am going to show my work down below in the exact same way for this blue side. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video, and fill in the formula for the blue side. All right, so for the blue side, I got the square root of 37, and now I'm going to do a green side because I have 3 sides to this triangle. Okay, and so I'm going to fill in this formula again and find the length of the green side. So go ahead and try that one on your own. All right, and so for my green side, I got the square root of 13. Now I'm ready to do step 3, which is finding the perimeter. And in order to find the perimeter, what I need to do is to add up all of these sides. So step 3 is perimeter. I'm using orange for this. Perimeter, so add all 3 sides. So I'm actually going to do this in my calculator, and I am going to type the square root of 20 plus the square root of 37 plus the square root of 13. I want you to practice doing that in your calculator right now, and pause the video while you do that and see if you're able to type it correctly and get the same answer that I do. If you're not able to type it correctly, now is the perfect time to raise your hand and ask Miss Brown how to show you, or to show you how to do it in your calculator. And what I got in my calculator is 14.16 is the perimeter of this figure. All right? Awesome. Now let's do example 8. M is the midpoint of segment TR, and M is located at 2, 3. T is located at 4, 3. So the very first step, again, that I'm going to tell you is to plot the points. So I plotted and I labeled both of my points. And I want you to notice that it does say M is the midpoint of segment TR. And so what you notice is that they give you the midpoint and they give you one side. They're asking you to find the other side. So we need to find point R. And we're going to do that by finding the pattern that exists from our endpoint T to our midpoint. So let's do that together. So my pattern from T to M, well, I don't rise or fall any, but I do need to go to the left 2 spaces. And I'm going to draw an arrow so that you know I'm going left, okay? So what I would need to do to go to the other side of M, which should be equal the amount away, is to repeat that pattern. So I'm going to start at M and I'm going to go 2 over again. And where that should put me is right here on the point 0, 3. Okay, and that is R. And that's how I find it. So R is at 0, 3. And a lot of times they won't actually ask you the coordinates. They might ask you what is the X value or what is the Y value. And we will see an example of that down below, okay? So that is if our line is a straight line and it's easy to count, okay? Let's go take a look at example 9 where it's not exactly that straight line, but our steps are going to be exactly the same. Alrighty, so number 9, step 1, we're going to plot our points M and Q, and then don't forget to label them as well. Alright, so when we label them, we know that we always want to be working towards the M, which is the midpoint, okay? So remember, in this situation, M is not the slope, M is the middle of this line segment, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to find the pattern, or in this case, because it's not straight across or straight up and down, it's going to be similar to finding the slope. So I would go down 4 and over 2, and that's how I get to the middle. Well, what I'd want to do is repeat this pattern one more time. Go down 4, over 2, and if you plot that point right there, that is going to be point P. Okay, and so they now want to know what is the X value of that point P. So let's label this as -2, -6. And so the X value is -2. Okay, great job. Now what I want you to do is to go straight down on your paper, and we're going to go look at example number 11, because example 11 really still is talking about midpoint, okay? It already gives me a graph, and it already gives me a line, and then it gives me some information. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do here is to create a picture and plot these points, all right? Even if they don't give you the picture like I did here, I would want for you to create this picture. Okay, so that's our step number 1. All right, so perfect. We've done step number 1. We created the picture, we plotted the points, and we labeled them. Now what you can do is really take 2 different approaches. You could find the midpoint of AD and then plot that, and then find the midpoint of AC, and that should be your final answer. But I do want to give you another testing strategy, okay? So what you can do with this picture that you have created for yourself is you could plot each of these points below. Plot each and see which one looks like it might be the coordinate B, okay? So I'm just going to plot them all. So -1 up 2, that is option A. Remember, these are answer choices now. B is at -1.5 up 1. C is at -2 and then up 1.5. All right, so I have plotted all 4 of my answer choices, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reread the word problem here. So it says C is the midpoint of segment AD. So I'm just going to visualize where approximately is the middle of the big line here. Where's the middle of this? And I think that's it. So A is actually the point C, okay? Second thing that they say to do, let's see, they say B is the midpoint of CD. All right, and so I found a typo in my paper. B should be the midpoint of CA, okay? So I need to find, let's switch this to blue. CA is right here in blue. Where would the middle of that be? And the one that falls in the middle of that most closely is D, okay? So this is point B. Whoops, it should have been in blue. And so the answer choice that matches that was D, all right, because we plotted all of those points. So that's one way to do it. You could plot the points and kind of follow the guidelines of the problem, okay? But the other way to do it would be using these ordered pairs and continuously finding the midpoint using the midpoint formula, okay? So I have completely erased all of my work from number 11, and I want to show you the more direct way of doing it. So I've added to step 2 here, find the midpoint of AD. So I am going to use these ordered pairs from A and D, and I'm going to find the midpoint, okay? So I'm going to have my x value, -4, plus my other x value, 2, okay? And then I'm going to have my y value, plus my other y value, again divided by 2. And if I reduce this, I get -2 over 2, which is -1. And then I get 4 over 2, which is 2. And this is going to be point C. And if I put that on my graph, it should fall perfectly right there. Okay, so that is C. Now that I know what C is, and I know that its location, I would do step 3. So my step 3 now would be to find the midpoint of AC. Okay, so let's use the point the x values of points A and C, -4 plus -1 divided by 2, and then the two y values. So -2 plus 2 divided by 2, and then I'm going to reduce both of those. I get -5 over 2, comma, and then 0 divided by 2 is 0. Remember that that is an ordered pair. And if I were to plot this point, it would be right there. -5 over 2 is the same as -2.5. And so you can see that even doing this more direct method, I still get answer choice D. Okay? Great job. All right, now let's move over. There is a picture right in the middle of your paper on the right-hand side that looks like this, and it's all about trapezoids. Okay? What we're going to do is we are going to start giving some definitions to these trapezoids. So let's do this. So starting with, what is a trapezoid? So I put the definition of a trapezoid up on top of the word trapezoid. You might be able to squeeze it out to the right on your paper, okay? All right, and now what I'm going to do is all these orange figures, we are going to define all the orange figures, okay, and what they mean. So a parallelogram, okay, I'm going to put that definition over here. A parallelogram has two sets of parallel sides and non-right angles, meaning they are not 90 degrees. A rhombus has four equal sides and non-right angles. All right, let's talk about our rectangle here. So I'm going to put this definition out here. A rectangle has two sets of equal sides and four right angles. And finally, a square. A square has four equal sides and four right angles. All right, so now that we have talked about all of our vocabulary, let's go look at number 10. Okay, the vertices of quadrilateral EFGH are, and then they give me these four ordered pairs, and they ask me what kind of quadrilateral is EFGH. So let's talk about what our steps are going to be. All right, so my steps for this are very simple. What I'm going to do is plot the points, connect the points, and then look at my vocabulary up above and see which one it kind of seems to match the best. So let's do that quickly together, okay? So I'm going to plot my points. All right, so I have plotted and connected the points. Now what I want to do is refer to my vocabulary up above using my answer choices. So I can tell you right now that this is not a square and it's not a rectangle because there's not four right angles, okay? So let's look at rhombus. A rhombus says that it has four equal sides. Well, I already know that this side down here was length 4 and this side up here is length 6. So it can't be a rhombus either. Okay, so that leaves trapezoid, and let's just refer to what trapezoid means. It's a quadrilateral, meaning it has four sides. It has one pair of parallel sides. Well, if you look at this side and this side, they are definitely parallel to one another. The other two sides don't really matter as long as I've got one set of parallel sides.